Lindsey. Welcome
Hi,
to,
Katie.
I know this interview, it feels like it's been a long time coming. So I appreciate your patience, but also I'm super excited to finally sit down and get the whole story because I feel like I've gotten bits and pieces here and there throughout our conversations. Yeah, so why don't we start at the beginning? Start at your diagnosis and what was happening in your life at the time that you really started to put two and two together and think maybe this is ADHD.
Okay. Yes. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. First, I wanted to say. So I'm very honored to be on the podcast. And I love your podcast. So thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I was diagnosed about I'm guessing 5 years ago. I don't keep track of exact dates and numbers in my mind super clearly, but I think it was about 5 or 6 years ago. And mine was kind of, I think, a little unique compared to some that I hear, where it wasn't that I was seeking out an ADHD diagnosis for myself that led me to it. What led me to it was my sister. We live near each other and we spend a lot of time together. And she was looking into ADHD because of she has young children, and one of her children is a boy. And she was just curious about some of his behavior that was really different from what we had experienced growing up. It was just the two of us in our family, two girls. And so his behavior was curious to her, and she kind of looked into
I
it.
feel the same way as a mom of a boy, and I had
Yeah,
brothers,
she
and
was
I'm
like,
still
wow,
like,
what's this? What's happening? And long story short, she ended up realizing through her research that it was ADHD most likely. And she's actually in the field of psychiatry. She is a psychiatrist, she sees adults and children, board certified. And, but that was the first time she really dug a lot deeper into ADHD specifically because of her son. And when she was doing that research, she realized, oh my goodness, it's genetic. And I think that she said to me, she called me and talked to me on the phone. And she said, I think I have it. I think our dad has it. And I think you probably have it too, Lindsey. And she explained to me why. And I was like, oh my gosh. I never would have thought of that on my own. I don't think. I don't know. I probably would have. It would have come around eventually. But when she pointed that out to me and explained her reasons why, and then I started digging into it myself and doing all my own research, I was just blown away that yes, I did have a lot of the symptoms, and it helped me understand myself so much better once I figured that out about myself and learned all about ADHD and what it was and got the diagnosis. So I did get the diagnosis after I researched it for myself and confirmed that I really thought I had it too.
did she diagnose you or did you go to somebody else?
Oh, yeah, I have to go to somebody else for
Um,
medical rules.
I'm curious. I'm
Conflict of
curious.
interest.
Were you what was it like when your sister first said that she thought you had it? Because I've often talked about how my therapist suggested I had it over the years, and I was kind of insulted. I was sort of like, "Do you really think I'm that much of a hot mess?" Even though I have been complaining about being a hot mess to my therapist for years, but like my misconception was so great that I
Right.
was a little bit insulted. What did you think when
Yeah.
she said that to you?
I think I was just surprised. I
Mm.
didn't know a lot about it. And so I was just surprised. But I think she's good about framing stuff, when she
Right.
brings it to me. This isn't the first time. So I think the way that she framed it for me, I moved pretty quickly from surprised to relieved because I think a lot of the questions I always had about my story and about why certain things were harder for me that I never understood. And I just thought, it's just me, I guess. I don't know. I don't know why these things are hard. And I always kind of felt like I didn't fit in with people. Like I would explain things and they'd give me this look like, I don't know what you're talking about. And so there was so many parts of my story and my life that kind of, as soon as I started learning about it, all of a sudden I felt like I was introduced to all these people who were similar to me and I didn't know they were out there, and I didn't know I was in that group. So it moved really quickly into relief for me, I think, because it just quickly was like, oh my gosh, these are my people.
Mm.
Like, there's a thing, there's a name for this. And it was fascinating for me. And she did steer me to podcasts to listen to and stuff that probably helped. Like,
Yeah.
because I kind of started with women and ADHD type of information when I
Mhm.
started learning about it. So I think
Right.
that helps.
Yeah, I'm always amazed at how the diagnosis in adulthood brings with it that emotion. I love how you said I moved from surprised to relieved because it's like the it always amazes me how lonely it can feel before a diagnosis, right? Like you said, like maybe it's just me, right? But also feeling like a lot of the struggles we're having, everybody struggles with. So you don't think of the struggles as being unique to you or unique to your brain, but you think of the failure as unique to you, right? And
Mhm.
like everybody
Mhm.
struggles with this, but other people seem to be okay and I don't. And that part is lonely. And I'm like, no, we've got it switched. We've got it
Exactly.
totally switched. But even growing up
There
with
you
your
go.
sister, I mean, I imagine you were both very similar. I don't know if you were close growing up, but like didn't if you both sort of had a similar approach to thinking or to executive function or whatever, like did you it must have been harder to even identify it as ADHD because you were sort
I
of
think
like, well, this
so.
is how people are, right? This is how my
It was
family
just
is.
the water that we swam in, I think. And I think, I've heard it explained one time, and it was really helpful for me that ADHD is one of those, it is a thing, I don't know how to call it, that where you feel like nothing is abnormal about the way that you're thinking about things. Like you don't feel that you have something and you need to figure out what it is necessarily until like enough things stack up in your life that make you go seek that out. But it's more like everybody else isn't cooperating with the way that I'm doing everything. It's
Hmm.
not that like I intuitively feel like I'm doing things differently or I'm thinking about things differently.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah, good point. True. And I think that's
Yeah.
why I think it's like learning a whole new language after you're
Mhm.
diagnosed and learning to just even like you said, like understand what why you're even thinking differently, right? Or what it is. Like there's so many things that I didn't even think of as a struggle until I was diagnosed. And then I had that like gut punch of like, oh yeah, like I really, really was struggling. And I don't even think I knew it until because you're too busy treading for water, right?
Surviving. Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, okay, so you got your diagnosis, and what are some of those things that come up for you when you look back over the course of your childhood or over the course of your life, motherhood, all of that? Because your children got diagnosed then after you, correct?
Yeah, I have sought out the formal diagnosis for my children are still young. They're
Yeah, that's
11
true.
and 6. So I'm working on
Yeah.
it.
Well, I know, but
I'm
I
working on
like
it.
you, it's the sort of the opposite, right? So many women are
Mhm.
diagnosed after their kids.
Yeah. So
And
it's
for
the
me, it
opposite
was
of that.
mostly, yeah, it was like, oh,
Mhm.
okay, I've been diagnosed. Now I have to look at my
Mhm.
kids and really
Yeah.
think,
Yeah.
what's going on. But looking back
Mhm.
over the course of your life, what are some of the things
Mhm.
that stand out to you where you say, oh, yeah, the signs were clearly there all along?
Yeah. Well, the thing that stood out I'll just start with the big one that my sister pointed out when she like first brought it to me was the difficulty to make a decision that I would have. So I would circle on like big questions that I had. Um, for example, like I thought I wanted a change in my career path and I figured that out like right when I started working. And that, so it had been like 15 years that I have thought about different possibilities of different careers that I could do. And I would interview people, I would kind of pursue it a little bit, pursue the idea a little bit while working in my current career. And then I would end up just like basically, I would never decide. all the way. Like I would pull back. And so I did that over and over the course of 15 years, really. So she kind of pointed that out to me, that like that circling and like the difficulty with actually choosing something and sticking to it is, she was kind of explaining to me how she thinks like that I have a little more of the inattentive ADHD, where I kind of get stuck in my head about things
Mhm.
and like overthink them and have a hard time actually like starting, like taking the step to start,
That one
or
small step. Yeah, right.
yeah, like making up my mind and deciding.
Yeah.
And then like I have a little less of the impulsive type. So whereas like with us in our relationship that you were pointing out, like it must have been interesting. It was, you both have it, but you grew up together, but we were also different too, in that she has more of that impulsive side. So she's always been really good at starting things and like taking risks and putting herself out there. She's better at that. And so I think she has a little more of that portion of it than I do. And
Mm.
so it's just interesting how we're all so different. You know, it's all slightly different and it comes out differently for each one of us. But I just thought that was a big one for me. I mean, that's a big decision to think about for that long. And I would struggle with, why is this so hard for me to pick something else? Like why can I hear people talk about just changing their career and just quitting the job and starting a different job? Like why is that so hard for me? So that was one. And then when I learned about ADHD and about like wanting to reduce the risk as much as possible, to like, I had some of that where I wanted to know I was going to succeed before I started something different, you know? So there's a lot of like all those things that I've learned over my whole life to cope, that end up kind of, they can hold you back too, because then all of a sudden you're in this pattern of like, you don't want to take too big of a risk because it might not succeed.
Mhm.
So there was that. But there's, oh my gosh, there's so much stuff as I look back over my life. Like I didn't struggle in school too much. I liked school. So I like learning. Love of learning is like one of my strengths. And
Mhm.
so I was fortunate in that. But so school was okay. But really it was like, for me, like high school, college was really hard for me socially. So I think that like social emotional stuff was hard for me with other girls specifically. Like as soon as girls got mean in like middle school, that was so hard for me. I feel like I was like that very naive person who believed everybody was nice, everybody wanted to be friends. Like, so, like everybody would tell you the truth, you know? And so it was really hard to like navigate all the social relationships of high school, college, and and I would always feel like I didn't really fit in, like with, especially with groups of girls, because of all the small talk and the interest that they would have. I felt different.
Well, there's also like a lot of relational rules too
Yeah.
among cliques of girls when you're younger too. And I think probably this is very common with ADHD, which is like not really understanding the rules, right? And feeling like it was just easier to be around boys because they didn't seem to have a lot of, they weren't like thinking about your tone or, expectations. Like it just felt a lot simpler. And I imagine that's probably pretty common because of just having that difficulty with like relational language.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I totally relate to that.
Yeah. So it took me a long time, I feel like socially, to figure out who my people are and to like find like my good friends who I wanted to be friends with, and we had a lot in common, you know.
Hmm.
I'm so thankful I finally figured that out. I think I was like in my 30s or something when I started figuring that out. Like, oh, I could be selective about this and not just hang out with everybody who invites me to and try to be friends with everybody. I could be authentic and just find like one person who I really enjoy hanging out with and focus on that.
Right? Yeah, that was one thing that always would confuse me until it wasn't until the pandemic that I realized I was actually an introvert. I always thought I was an extrovert because I was very like social and gregarious and outgoing and loved having conversations one-on-one with people, but it was in groups that I really, really struggled. And so that idea of like the group of friends was never something that I could manage or appealed to me, but I loved all of these solo friendships that and they didn't really know each other. And I always felt like I was kind of managing them. And I always felt a lot of FOMO and jealousy of those, groups of females that would like go on vacations and stuff um, yeah, but now I'm like, oh no, it's really just a lot easier to focus
Makes
to
sense.
have a conversation with one
We
person.
like to go deeper and like just be authentic and
Yeah.
let our hair down. The other thing I was gonna say is like just with work, and just in general, like the time blindness stuff. Like I would run late to everything basically. I would always cut it like to the minute, you know. And I think that's very common, and it also adds like a level of excitement to your everyday life when it's mundane to be like, okay, now I have to like race the clock to see if I'm going to make it to my appointment on time. I'm just injecting adrenaline throughout my day.
I was doing that the other day with with the fridge ding. Sometimes I like leave the door open on the fridge and I try to do what I need to do with whatever
Yeah.
food and try to get it back in the fridge before it dings. And and I was like, oh no, the door made the ding sound. I've lost. And I was like, I've lost what? What am I even doing? I just had to laugh.
Yeah, it's funny once you learn about it, but when
Right?
you don't know about it, you're like, oh my gosh. So I would like have a lot of shame around running late to stuff
Mhm.
because I felt like I would get messaging back of like it would make people perceive it was a perception thing. Like the other people on the receiving end of that, like for example, coworkers in the you know, I don't even know if it was everybody. Usually it'd be like one person would say something, and it would be like a very big moral character failure if you had not realized you should have planned that better. So that was a big one for me that when I learned about that and I was able to realize like, oh, that's how my brain works. And I'm still learning, like, to release the shame when that happens because it still does happen sometimes. I'm getting better. Like, I have more supports in place now for myself to not cut it so close all the time, but I'll still do it sometimes. And when I do it and there's like a negative consequence, I at least can catch it. Like I feel the wave of shame coming over me and I feel really upset and really exposed, but then I will like be able to talk to myself and say, "Lindsey, like you did your best. It's your brain wiring that makes that hard. You know that." So, and I'm giving myself compassion and like grace around that instead of just totally like becoming overwhelmed in shame for the fact
Mhm.
that that happened.
Yeah.
So I'll do that with appointments too sometimes. Like I'll forget about an appointment or not put it on my calendar correctly, like a doctor appointment, for example. And sometimes I'll have to pay. And I'll say, well, that's the ADHD tax. Because I've heard people explain that way. And I'm like, that's really good. That's a really good way. I know that's not positive, but at least I'm not saying, like, at least I'm not beating myself up now and saying, geez, why would you do that, Lindsey? You should be more responsible by now.
Mhm. Well,
Now I'd say,
I
it
think so
happens.
many of these traits, because I struggle with those too, still, it's not like I'm magically fixed after my diagnosis or even after years of coaching and educating myself. Like I try, right? But obviously there's going to be things that that happen. And like you said, just having that compassion with yourself and having that grace with yourself, because it is looked at as a character flaw, right? And I think that was one of the things I think with so many of us struggle with being late or for being forgetful. It's like people assume you don't care or that you are careless. And I think for so many of us before a diagnosis, it's like that confusion of like, do I not care? Like, am I careless? Like, I'm really feeling like, gosh, I work so hard to care and to show I care. And I'm actually quite a compassionate, hardworking person, but it never actually looking that way on the outside. And that disconnect, I think, is where that shame really dwells.
Mhm.
And so, like you said, like I love the fact that you literally just have to talk to yourself and be like, it's okay to make mistakes. But I think it's like the older we get, the harder we try, or the harder we are on ourselves when we continually make these same errors over and over again, not really understanding what they are. Yeah.
Hmm. That's so true. And I realized like I've done a lot of work on myself with my like trying to have better self-compassion, so that like I've learned some tools that I use when that kind of thing happens now. So I'll like pause and I will talk out loud to myself when I feel, I mean, it's totally physical, this type of thing that I'm talking about, when you miss the bus and it's already left and the person gives you attitude about the fact that you missed it. There's a huge wave of feeling that comes over me, so I can very quickly feel that. I feel it still, but then I'll like pause and talk to myself and say, you tried really hard. Like I try to talk to myself the way I would talk to a friend.
I was just gonna say, I sound like it's like reparenting a lot of the way,
Exactly.
right? Where I'm like, one of the most important parts of parenting is repair, right? You're going to yell, you're going to lose your temper, you're going to do things you regret with in parenting. At least I certainly have done. But like the most important part is to repair that relationship, apologize, acknowledge, validate, right? And so we're just instead of doing that to our kids, we're doing that for ourselves in these moments. And it's like, yeah, it's going to happen. It's always going to happen. But like, how am
Yeah.
I going to respond? I think that is the most important takeaway. Yeah.
Yeah, it's huge. So I'm thankful for that, learning that. And that's what like having the diagnosis has helped me get to. I can't
Mm.
imagine if I didn't have it and I was still just not knowing why I did that. That was the best thing about getting this diagnosis, is that then I could understand why that was hard for me. And just understanding and having a name is so important, I feel like,
Yeah.
to then go forward. So, and then another thing I thought about with this, with what were those things that I looked back and saw, oh, okay, was exercise. I have always loved exercise and movement, and I don't like sitting still all day. And that was one of the things that was hard about me when I first started in my career, was that it was an office, sit at a computer from 8 to 5 is the standard. So that's a very long time to sit still and focus and work. And I really have realized that, like, I think that maybe that is part of my ADHD, that I like to move. I need movement of my body, like throughout the day. I need it to be able to focus. I need breaks. I need to get up and move around. Um, and I also need to exercise every day. And I used to feel guilty about that I felt like I needed it so much. And this is so bizarre.
I was going to say, like, guilty toward whom?
This is
Your
wild.
your
It
family,
was,
or just the time you took for yourself, or
yeah.
yeah.
When I had my kids,
Ah, yes.
when they were
The
babies,
yeah.
and I would feel like I had to get my workout. It was like life or death.
Mhm.
And if it wasn't happening for some reason, and I would, say to my husband, like, I have to work out, like it would get kind of dire as the
Good
day
for
wore
you, though.
on.
Seriously. I mean,
Uh,
that is some serious like new mom self-care that I
Thank
think,
you.
like good for you. Even if it felt
Yeah.
compulsive. Like I think so many
Yeah.
of us, especially when the babies are little, just have that visceral, like, I have to always be there. Oh, like your life is not your own anymore. And I think it's so important to take that time for yourself.
Yeah. I had those competing messages in my mind of like I should always be there and I should not feel bad about like I should not feel like I need to leave. Yeah. So when I learned about ADHD and I heard somebody get interviewed who talked about how much they loved exercise and that they loved running and they would do it every day and like that they just used that so much as a tool for themselves. I was like, that is what I have been doing all these years. I have used that. And I'm so thankful our parents just so happened to raise us to appreciate exercise. Like they exercised, which is a miracle in that, when we were growing up, that we had that modeled. And so that I did feel like that was a normal part of life, that it was like normal to exercise regularly. And I had that in my routine. So that probably was one of the things that like helped me survive the most up until I got the diagnosis and was able to like put more things in place to help myself. That was one that I always had. But I used to feel guilty about it, like I said. And so when I learned about ADHD and I realized like, oh, that's really actually healthy. That's a healthy support tool. And totally understandable.
Yeah.
I have just leaned into it now, and I'm like, yep, I don't feel bad now that I want to exercise every day.
It's not me. I have no choice.
I need
Yeah.
it. And I used to feel also bad, like I would want to walk around and do stuff sometimes during the work time. And I used to feel bad about that. Like, oh, I should only sit here and work during work time. I had like strict limits on things. And so when I learned about ADHD, I was able to realize it's okay to do things differently. I think that was it. It was like I got permission for myself to do things differently. And I decided it's okay to work for 25 minutes and take a 5-minute break where you walk around and move your body and then go back to work for another 25 minutes. And I had never had that explained to me before, that that's a model you can use. And I didn't know about it really until I got the diagnosis. So,
Yeah, this is a conversation I have a lot with my kids around, ADHD is an explanation, not an excuse, right? Because sometimes my kids think that, I'm too hard on them about certain things where they're like, you should be more understanding. I have ADHD. I'm not going to be able to do this. And I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like having ADHD doesn't mean you can't focus. It doesn't mean you can't do something, right? It's what support tools do you need to get there and
yeah.
understanding that you're going to maybe take a different approach, but it's not an immediate, excuse. I'm trying to think of a better word, but like it's not an immediate write-off where it's like, oh, sorry, I have ADHD, so my room's going to be a mess, right? Like it's going to be just a one that's a particular
But
sore
mind
spot in
example.
our home, right? But again, it's like, sometimes it feels like I get into that argument all the time with my children about like, am I being too hard on them? And should I be more accepting of their ADHD? Or is it really about like, let's get to the root of what support you need and what tools and structure you need. And so, like you were saying with exercise, like I think most elite athletes probably have ADHD. I think a lot of them do. And you see that when they stop, if they get injured or if they retire, they, have that don't have that outlet anymore. And I think that's where a lot of that anxiety and depression and ennui and malaise and what is my life purpose starts to come into play because it's like it's so incredibly helpful for an ADHD brain. And
It
I'm
is.
guessing like your parents probably threw you into sports or some kind of activities just to get you to get you to
I think
calm
so.
down.
Yep. I think so too. I think I was a little hyper when I was younger.
Yeah. Well, but even like one of the things I've thought about with hyperactivity recently, because even with, looking at like the difference between girls and boys and why boys are, why our idea of what ADHD looks like so often is that little boy symptom. And the idea of hyperactivity, it's all about the interpretation of what is hyperactivity, because I think
Yeah.
it can be physical, but it
Mhm.
also manifests if you're not moving around. It manifests, you just start spinning inside, and it manifests as anxious thoughts and inattentiveness, right? And so it's like I had it was Gilly Kahn's book that's actually coming out very soon, so I'll put a link to it in the show notes. She talks about the emotional side, the emotional elements of ADHD in women, and she talks about hyperactivity like it's like this energy that has to be used, and if it's not used up physically, it then manifests and needs to be used up mentally, and you start to have those like mental tornadoes. And that's always how I think about it now when I'm having like anxious spinning thoughts. My
Mhm.
first thought now is, all right, I gotta go, I gotta move. Like I gotta
Yeah,
move this energy out of my body. And I don't know, I felt like that visual, or that, I guess that way of describing it as an energy that needs to be expended, I thought was really helpful.
that's really powerful. I agree with that. And I think Dr. Hollowell has some good talks about that too for with women and ADHD and how it looks different in girls and women, the hyperactivity component and how, but I like that, the energy idea, how it's like, okay, when I start to feel that like ruminating starting to happen or that like for me, I'll start to feel like discontent about things, like, oh, I need to change this or I need to get out of this. A lot of times that's how I can tell I'm start to ruminate. And it's one of those mental like energy storm type of thing is coming in.
Right? And it's like, maybe I
Go
don't need
move.
deep breathing right now. Maybe I just need to get out and go for a
Yeah.
really like brisk
Yeah.
walk. Yeah, I
And being
really,
outside too,
right?
like
Yeah,
in a machine.
totally.
But that's a big component.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I wonder how that one fits into because it's true.
I think
And
it's
like,
just good for our mental, like, um, I don't know what it is, but I've read that too, that it is good for if you can combine exercise with being outside, it's like magic for
yeah,
your brain.
right. Um,
Mhm.
I know, but when I tore my MCL earlier this year and I was like stuck on the couch, I was like fascinated almost from like a scientific perspective, how quickly my mental health started deteriorating when I wasn't able to like get up and move around. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, wow, these are really, really connected.
Yeah. It's a
Yeah.
really big, deep connection happening there.
But at the same time, at least I wasn't like, I felt like it was very helpful to have that information, right? Like to say, like, oh, okay, now I understand what's going on. Whereas another time in my life, I probably would have just felt
Get sucked
terrible.
into that.
Just been like,
Exactly.
I don't know, it's just me, right?
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just a terrible wife and mother.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. A lot
But
of a lot of the things that have stood out to me that were things that were hard that I didn't understand about myself until I got the ADHD diagnosis are those types of things that are like expected of us as women in the roles that we have. So like I'm like as I'm thinking through it all, I'm like, oh, there's a huge thread here of like the typical this is what a woman should be able to do. A lot of my symptoms that I didn't understand about myself are related to that. Because when I remember like especially once I had kids, a lot I would feel that a lot. Like I would forget to pack their snacks, for example, in the diaper bag, and we'd go to the park and they'd be hungry for a snack. And I'm like, oh, I didn't think to bring a snack, you know? And I would notice that other moms were really good at that. Like they would have their little snack containers everywhere they went. And I'm like, dang, I wish I was better at that. I don't know why. That's hard for me. I don't think through that far. And then also like dinner prep. I have always struggled with dinner prep and that time of the day and just that I don't want to do it. I'd rather be outside with the kids. I don't want to be in the kitchen cooking. And like, and I don't like cooking that much. Like it feels stressful to me. And so I would describe that to other mom friends, and that's when I would feel like I would get that look, like we don't really get what you're talking about.
but this is your
It's
purpose
not
in
that
life.
hard. Yeah,
Oh, or the yes, the not, it's not that
it's
hard
not
look.
that hard.
Yes, right?
Yeah.
Well, I get that.
But,
My husband loves to cook because I think for him it's like a way to escape. And
mhm,
so we always had an agreement from when the kids were really little that I was like, I will take the children because I hate
mhm,
cooking, and you do the
mhm,
cooking as a way to like provide for us, but also not
mhm.
having to be present with us. And it would
Yeah,
like worked really well because I think for him it turned
perfect.
into like an escape, like a way to unwind at the end of the day, which was
Mhm,
really nice for him. But like you said, for me, there was too much chaos, there was too much going on, there were too many
mhm,
instructions to follow. So I always missed one, and then I would screw something up, and then I would forget an ingredient, and then I just, it just felt like, yeah, there was way too much. I still
yeah.
don't really love cooking. I do
Mhm.
like cooking kits. Those are I find very helpful, but yeah, otherwise I would much rather just my husband just took that part over,
Yeah,
thankfully. How
luckily.
I if I may, how was your spouse's like reaction to all of this? Like, hey, by the way, we all have ADHD, or my sister, my family. Um, was he on board? Was he sort of like, I don't know what you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, luckily he's been supportive of it all. Like, I can't, that would be really hard, I feel like, if he had doubted me or something about that. Luckily he was very receptive and like trusts me about myself and what I think I have and when I pursued it and all that. Now, he's not like, he wasn't like, oh, I'm going to dive in and learn all about ADHD with you.
I bet it was the same with pregnancy too, right?
Yeah,
I was like,
exactly. He's like,
I read a
okay,
hundred
I'll
books while
support
I
you.
was pregnant.
Yeah. I have a whole story I could to go into about that I dragged him along to, but I won't do that right now. We'll get off topic. But yeah, so like I feel like we have a good yin and yang or like a good, agreement of that he's supportive and he was supportive of it but I'm the one who pursued it and researched it and did all the things to get the diagnosis and I tell him everything that I'm learning. So he gets information from me. So, yeah, he's been supportive. And I think he's one of those people that's kind of like very even keeled and not very like big swings emotionally or anything. So, I think though that it's been helpful to him too, I'm going to say, over the years as I've kind of slowly educated him about it in my own way. I'm hoping that it's helped him to understand me better and to understand things that, like, I'm guessing would have been confusing to him about our relationship, like things I would do that maybe other wives that he sees don't do, like the cooking example. Like maybe
Yeah.
he wondered why I didn't like to cook, and then when I was able to explain ADHD and like how this affects my brain, I think it's helped him understand me better.
Yeah.
So that's
Well,
good.
I think there's a lot of layers there too, because I think it's like not only is it complicated in terms of the executive functioning side, but then there's the shame side, right? And so, like, my husband, I think often he was also along for the ride and would hear and still like has to listen to me talk about it endlessly and supports it, but would never actually do independent research.
Yeah.
But he doesn't need to at
Yeah.
this point. But like, I think it was he never really understood why I would feel so much shame around things too. And that's where I think
Mhm.
as a woman, it can be so much more complicated because so much of it falls into our roles, like you said, as wives and mothers. And so, like, if the example you gave of going to the playground without food, I mean, he did that, right? He did that all the time, but he just didn't feel shame about it. And so I think like so much of it is that load that we put on ourselves, which is like, this says so much about what kind of a person I am. Whereas, my husband, I don't know if it's because he's a male and he was socialized to just never feel bad about himself as a white male, but like, it's that idea of like, he wouldn't think of that as a character flaw necessarily. He would just be like, yeah, I forgot the food. Oh, well, sucks for
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Good thing they have their mom, but like,
Exactly.
right. But for what, if that were to happen, if the same thing were to happen to me, there's just so much more baggage around a lot
Yeah.
of that stuff too. And I found that really hard to articulate in the beginning, I think, where he was sort of
Mhm.
like, there's nothing wrong with you. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like this was, there's all these things that I struggle with. And he was like, all right. Um,
Yeah.
so I
Yeah.
think in some ways the conversation around ADHD helped me understand that I was actually like a really great mom and partner
Mm,
and wasn't paying attention to that. And so,
that's
but
so
seeing it
good.
through his eyes, almost that confusion has been
Hmm.
helpful, I think, in a lot of ways. And I'm lucky, obviously. I think, like you said, like not everybody has a supportive partner when it
Yeah.
comes to the diagnosis, or at least a curious one who's sort of like, oh,
Mhm.
okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to learn more and more as I've gotten older and as I've been working on, juggling all the things that we do with jobs and caretaking of children and things like that. To ask for help more, basically, from my husband. But I think it doesn't have to be our partner if they're not as supportive. Like it could also, like I watch what other people do, and I see um, other women managing their ADHD really well when they're delegating a lot to other people too. Like just thinking outside the box and like, okay, what is something I don't, how could I make this easier for myself if I don't need to be doing all of this in this one way, like there's so many other ways that this could be done.
Mhm.
So, like, for example, like cooking breakfast for the kids in the morning before school, if that's all stressful feeling and you're like rushing to also go to work and it's hard, but your spouse can't help you with that, like, can I use paper plates instead of the glass plates so that I can just throw it all away at the end instead of having to clean dishes or having dishes stacked up in the kitchen that are going to be waiting for later, you know? So I feel like
Yeah.
a lot of it's a game of like thinking outside the box of how else could we be doing all these things.
Well, but also simultaneously challenging a lot of those inner thoughts about, oh, you're being terrible to the environment when you're using paper plates, and like always having to weigh the pros and cons in the moment, which I think is also exhausting. Like, I think a lot of that, like, even this idea of like, what if I asked for help before I was struggling? you
I
know?
love that.
But my immediate reaction to that is, oh, don't be selfish, right? And so it's like that internalized voice that we carry with us about like, no, we should have exhausted all options that of like the moral righteousness that exists there in terms of asking for help. I think is something that we carry with us a lot. I'm like, why wouldn't I ask for help? Now my favorite question is, who can I get to do this for me?
Yeah,
Because I don't want to
exactly.
do it.
Once you start figuring out that works, it's like, oh my gosh, what else can I do this with?
Right. But even like, and I think back to society even a generation or so ago where, women stayed with their parents, right? Or like we lived closer to our relatives, and it was much more of a communal, it takes a village type of scenario. And I think we've sort of moved away from that in the last couple generations. Like when you were talking, I was reminded of my husband's aunt was asking me once when my daughter was a baby. So I obviously was not diagnosed at this point, but she was like, "So, how's it going? How's mom life?" And I was like, it's really hard. And it just like tumbled out of me because I
Yeah,
probably had had no sleep.
yeah, you're
She's
probably
not the
exhausted.
kind of person I should have like been vulnerable around, because she was sort of like, huh, I don't remember it being hard. I remember that being like a really easy time. And I was like, oh, like just like my heart sank because I felt so invalidated. But also, like, they lived in a very close-knit community on Long Island, and they all lived within a block of each other, and they had so much help. So it was built into their relationships in a way, like you said, if your husband's working, or, you can't immediately like you don't have to hire somebody. The help is always there before you are having to even ask for it. And I think that I feel like that's slowly being, sapped out of the way in which we live our lives as families in this country. So
That's so true. Hmm.
I
That's
want
a
to bring
very
that back.
good.
That's why I keep telling my kids now, I'm like, I am bringing back collectivist culture
Yeah.
single-handedly, ironically, but I'm like, I am going to live with you and I'm going to help you with your kids and you're going to help me. Like, I'm like, none of this moving to the other
Yeah.
side of the
Far
country
away.
stuff. Like, I'm
Mm.
sorry, it just does not work.
I
Uh,
agree. I agree.
so I'm like, lay those messages in now before they get older.
Exactly. I'm gonna go ahead and train you up for that. That's so true. And it's just, I think too, like, we can do that in other creative ways too. Like, I have a girlfriend who's really good about like living in that communal way, basically, like asking for help with something if she needs it. And then it's amazing when a friend asks you for help, how that kind of like deepens the friendship, because then you feel like, oh, okay, it feels good to be able to help somebody else. And then I can ask them for help the next time I need help. It kind of just changes the dynamic, you know? So I'm trying to learn that. Like, it's okay to ask a good friend for something that you think they could help you with, and then
Right?
you create this new system where you're like supporting each other.
Well, and there's actually like makes them feel better too, right? Like that's one of the things I always talk about with clients when it comes to like asking for help, even with their spouse, right? Where I'm like, you know, like husbands, when you have young kids, like husbands feel really empowered when you leave them alone with the kids to make their own choices and you don't give them this whole list of do this and then do that and then do this and then like you think you're being helpful.
Yeah.
But what you're actually doing is being controlling. And so like it's like you know, and so with a friend, it's like it's a gift to allow them to help you. And if we looked at
Yeah.
it more like that as opposed to a burden, it has that like mutually beneficial element to it. But I'm like, no, you need to just leave the house, turn your
Yeah.
cell phone off, and
Exactly.
your husband needs to figure it out. He'll feel so good about himself when you
Yeah.
come. He'll feel so like, you know, uh, what's the word, like victorious when you come home and he figured
Exactly.
out whatever he needed to figure out. But yeah, um, that's my advice to my younger self.
That's really good.
Right?
That took me a long time to learn too.
Oh,
And I remember
totally.
coming back and being like, oh my gosh, like they would all be so happy. And I was like, I can't believe I thought I couldn't do that, you know?
Yeah, but you have to learn. I mean,
For good.
but
Yeah.
you think you're helping everybody out by doing as
Right.
much as possible and
Yeah.
then giving them kind of the dregs of what you couldn't carry. And really it's the
Yeah.
opposite. It's like, no, 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 you want to offload as much as possible. It's your gift to the other people.
Exactly. Like everybody's better.
Right? Everybody's when mom's happy, everybody's happy. Yeah.
Exactly.
All right. I can't believe. See, this is what happens. So much.
I
I'm like, I
know.
haven't even asked you about
Gone
coaching.
down that rabbit trail.
Okay. Well, if you want to hear more about how Lindsey ended up as an ADHD coach, listen to
Okay.
episode 200 because we talk a lot about that. Yeah, I mean, what is it, I guess, you know, that when you did get into ADHD coaching, what are some of those things you love to work on with your clients?
That's a good question.
You had some really good tips and tricks already that you were just talking about.
Yeah, I think I love like um, helping them when helping them figure out like a better balance. Like when there's a certain area that's kind of off balance in life, whether it's like you know, taking care of ourselves with our physical fitness or our health, you know, or the job, like having some kind of better boundaries to help the job not be so like demanding of our time or of our whatever it is, our psyche, like that we're thinking about it all the time. Finding the better balance to be able to bring the job back into the right proportion. I love helping with things like that. Like I'm trying to think of the word for it. Like that integration. That's the
Hmm.
word. I love helping people like better integrate who they are and like all those different areas of life into good balances so that it's all integrated as much as possible. It's never perfect, but it's like, okay, this piece is getting too big. Let's get it back a little more down to the size that you want it to be so that you feel like the whole pie is working well for you.
Mm.
That's that's one of my favorite things, I think, when that starts to happen and you can see as a client's coming back and they're like doing the steps in between the times to do that for themselves. And then I can see a lot of times their increase in satisfaction with how their life is going because they're making those changes and they're getting things into the right positions in their
Cool.
life.
Now, do you
So,
use
yeah.
like a satisfaction wheel with your
Yeah.
clients? Okay, I'm like you keep doing the wheel, and I'm like, all
I
right,
have the wheel in my mind. Yep.
I know about the I learned about the
Like,
wheel from like integrative nutrition element, but yeah, it is super helpful. I've never thought about like quantifying satisfaction like that. That's so important to check in about that. I love that you do that because I think
yeah.
I think in general, with ADHD, we don't spend a lot of time looking over our shoulder at how far we've come. We're always
Mhm.
looking forward at like what still needs to be fixed or tackled, right? And so I love that idea of like intentionally taking a moment and just saying
Mhm.
like, all right, let's look at our satisfaction levels,
Mhm.
and then compare them to where we were.
Yeah. And then see if there's just one that you can make like one movement in, a small movement toward the direction that you want to go. And
Mhm.
it's amazing how just like recognizing it and then just one small thing in that direction can just feel so empowering, I feel like, and like lead to the momentum to keep everything going in a better direction. So,
Yeah.
I love that. Another thing I really, really love that was like amazing for me to learn when I went through coaching training is values work, like learning about what are my values as a person, and then being able to use that as a grid to make decisions. That was so enlightening for me to learn for myself. And I think it's because of how hard it is for me to make decisions um, that I found that tool so helpful. So I really love being able to share that with any clients who also I can see like there's a lot of times like underlying stuff. There's maybe there may not be awareness of what the values are and like specifically and how they rank against each other. And so a lot of times like what I notice is when I would feel a lot of stress internally about a decision that I made, what I realized after I did the values exercise is that would happen when something was conflicting with one of my top values. And I didn't realize it because I didn't know what my values were. I had never named them.
Right?
I didn't know you could do that. So once I learned them, I was like, oh, that's why I would feel so stressy about this decision. I mean, it was little things, but it would be like constant decisions you're having to make for your family and stuff. And the ones that would stress me out would be the ones a lot of times that were bumping up against my top values. And so once I knew that, I was like, oh, well, is this more important than this top value of mine? And a lot of times it wouldn't be. So I could say
Hmm.
no to that thing.
Yeah.
But without all that awareness, I didn't know that was what was happening in my life. So I love being able to share that with other people.
Yeah, that is a really helpful tool.
Mhm.
I mean, especially even just like we were talking about with the baggage that comes with some of these things as a woman and as a mother and as a wife, where it's like, okay, this is like your values are dictating whether you feel shame about a behavior that somebody else might be like, whatever. And you take that with you like a brick wherever you go. So yeah, but even like you said, like even articulating what your values are is another step that I think a lot of people just sort of assume everybody knows. And even if you have figured out your values, you still have to remember what they are in the moment. And so
Yeah,
it's like just, sometimes you have to take those self-tests over and over and over and over
yeah,
again.
it's true.
Yeah.
But yeah, those are probably the top ones. I really like anything that my clients bring to me, just being able to hold the space for them to feel like they have us like support to be able to share whatever it is that's on their mind for that day. I just think that's so powerful for us in the ADHD community, because a lot of us have, many of us have been through our whole life without even knowing we had this.
Mhm.
And so to be able to come like talk to somebody else who understands ADHD and who can listen well, is that in and of itself is really healing, that process. So I really love that, just being able to create that space for somebody,
Mhm.
one appointment at a time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I just was thinking of how many women I've met who would come to me either for coaching or group coaching or one of the other scenarios where it was like, okay, I got this diagnosis now, like let's fix me and figure out like how I can be the person I used to be. And it was like, well, there's actually you don't need to be fixed. So, let's lose that first.
Yeah.
But like watching that evolution of ADHD going from a disorder that you're diagnosed with to kind of being this essence of your personality that is this wonderful thing of that you can actually embrace about
Mhm.
you, I think is
Mhm.
always a wonderful evolution that hope most of us go through. I mean, if you didn't have to go through that, that's awesome. But I think for most of us, there was sort of that reframing
Yeah.
over of like, oh God, this is says all the things that are wrong with me. And now I'm
Yeah.
like, no, this is also all the things that are right with me.
Yeah. Also,
uh,
what people love about me.
right? Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything that you would say that you love most about your ADHD? And
That's such a good question. Hmm. I think that is, I think what I love most about it is to think about that. I think it is my empathy, I'm going to say, because I have learned that like a lot of us with ADHD brain wiring are a lot of times like higher on the empathy side. And I do feel like I have really high empathy. And I'm thankful for that because I like listening and getting to know people one on one, especially. I like being able to hear somebody else's story and like think about what life is like from their perspective. And I like being able to support people one on one. And so I think that empathy is really I'm thankful for that quality because I feel like it helps me to just have richer relationships in my life and appreciate those relationships a lot. And it helps me in a lot of areas, actually. I think it helps me with all the areas of life. And, it's like anything else, it always has an underside. You can go too far. That's why I have to learn how to rein that in. Not be like over dependent on how everybody else feels, but like not absorb everybody's emotions.
yeah.
But I think it has served me very well with just my career and my just relationships, friendships, family, parenting. Like I love I love children, period. I think they're so funny to listen to like the things that they say. And I love how like straightforward they are. Like there's no trying to figure out what they think about something. They tell you
Mhm.
point blank. And I think I really love that about them.
Yeah.
And so I think empathy helps with kids too, because they can sense like if you really care about what they're saying or if you're kind of checked out and just like going through the motions. And so it helps me do that.
Well, and I'm sure it helps you be a fantastic coach.
Thank
And
you.
so, I mean, I think that's also like such a wonderful part of an adult diagnosis too, is that ability to turn around and help others and do this wonderful job that you're now doing instead of sitting at a desk 8 to 5.
Thank you. Staring at an Excel file like what?
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No, that's
Hopefully there are people who enjoy that.
there
But
are.
yeah, right. Being able to find a career that is more suited to what lights you up, I think is also so wonderful. So, uh,
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. And I agree. I think that is what makes me enjoy coaching for sure.
yeah.
Because, oh, you get to use this strength that you have and put it to good work.
Absolutely, right? And also like it just feels great. I mean,
It does.
it does everything about it. So,
Mhm.
well, thank you for sitting down with me and sharing your story. I know, we've talked about in episode 200 and also on our website and newsletter. Lindsey's part of the Women and ADHD coaching team. So you can find out more about Lindsey at womenandadhd.com/Lindsey. Um,
Yes.
but
Well,
yeah,
thank you for having me. It is really an honor and a pleasure to
well,
get to
it's
connect with you.
I've always said my favorite episodes are the ones where listeners give back, right? And are sort of like have said that they have loved the podcast or learned from the podcast or in some way benefited and then can turn around and help others with their story. And I think it's amazing. It's just so it's that
Yep.
communal
Back to
element,
that.
right?
Back to that community. Yep. You're fostering your community right
Right?
here.
It's this giant virtual golden girls that we're creating here.
Exactly. I love it. Sign me up. I'm in.